Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my top 15 week number 11 waiver wire ads for the 2024 fantasy football season. 15 players that I believe you should not just walk, you should run to the waiver wire to pick up prior to week number 11 of the 2024 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my top 15 week number 11 waiver wire ads for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with my number one waiver wire ad of the week, and that is Jaylen Warren, running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, going up against the Baltimore Ravens this week in Pittsburgh. Now, Jaylen Warren is currently rostered in 61.6% of leagues on ESPN, so if you play on CBS, NFL, Sleeper, MFL, any other platform, then the rostership percentage is going to be slightly different, though I will note in some cases the rostership percentage could be wildly different. Now, Jaylen Warren is rostered in a majority of leagues, so if you're watching today's video looking for some more deeper cuts as we get further and further into the waiver wire ads, there's definitely going to be players for you to pick up. Now, Jaylen Warren last week up against the Washington Commanders in Washington was the running back 23, 14 carries for 66 yards, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 29 yards and a fumble lost, which was essentially on the goal line. Now, Najee left that game with an ankle injury. He said that he got rolled up on and he's going to end up having further tests done. Since he did end up coming back into the game on the next drive, I don't think this is going to be some severe injury that really hampers Najee Harris from being good to go this week. But if he was to, for some reason, miss time with this injury, then you would want Jaylen Warren in your lineup. And if Najee continues to play, then if you are in a deeper league, or maybe you're dealing with a bunch of teams on bye, right? The Cardinals, the Panthers, the Giants, the Bucks, maybe you have multiple running backs on bye, Jaylen Warren is an okay fill-in. But if something was to happen to Najee Harris, knock on wood, we don't root for injury, I think Jaylen Warren could end up being a league winner. And I also talked about this last week, how I believe deep down Arthur Smith is chomping at the bit to continue to give Jaylen Warren more touches. Last week, in terms of the snaps, Harris played 47%, Warren 45%. So again, while I definitely don't think Jaylen Warren's this guy that you need to be starting in week number 11, he is far from must start. He might not even be listed as a start in my running back start or sit video or in my running back rankings later on in the week. But if you are in a pickle, Jaylen Warren is startable, and again, he is a premier handcuff. At number 2, we got Audric Estime, running back of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Atlanta Falcons. So if Jaylen Warren isn't available, Audric Estime will be, unless you're in the 1.1% of leagues on ESPN where he is rostered. He was the running back 40 last week in Kansas City in Arrowhead, 14 carries for 53 yards, 3.8 yards per carry. Now, all of that talk from Sean Payton, all of that talk about how Audric Estime was going to get a higher workload was 100% true. It wasn't any of that coach speak BS where you hear, oh, we're going to look to get this guy more involved. And then you look at the snaps and he played like 5% more snaps, or he got 3 more total snaps. No, this was a Audric Estime takeover of great magnitude. He played 45% of the snaps, Javonte played 29%, and Jaleel McLaughlin 12%. So Javonte had just 1 carry in that game, and Jaleel had 2. So it's officially Audric Estime season in Denver, and in better matchups like up against the Falcons. And as Bo Nix gets more comfortable in this offense, I really do believe that Audric Estime could become start-worthy, especially if he starts playing 60% of the snaps and more snaps are being taken away from Javonte and Jaleel. As of right now, he's kind of just a speculative ad, but based upon what we saw last week, it's clear that the team wants to use him. At number 3, we have Quentin Johnston, QJ, wide receiver of the Chargers, going up against the Bengals this week, 45.4% rostered on ESPN for Quentin Johnston. Now, week 10 versus the Titans, he was the wide receiver 25, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 24 yards and a touchdown, which now marks Michael Jordan 96-97 back-to-back games with a touchdown. If Quentin Johnston was able to get around like 6 targets a week we would be talking about this guy as close to being a clear top 24 wide receiver week in and week out, especially with the offense looking to throw the ball more and with how Justin Herbert has been playing. But, and this is a big but shout out to Riley Reid, with Ladd McConkey being the guy, Quentin Johnston just cannot be considered as that locked and loaded top 24 guy. He is much more of a flex option. This week, though, the upside is huge up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense in terms of snaps. Quentin Johnston led the wide receivers in snaps with 83%. Ladd played 78%. Joshua Palmer 53%. And Eagles legend Jalen Reagor played 31% of the snaps. Next up, we move to Xavier. Somebody thought Tyjae Legette, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are on bye this week. 47.6% rostered on ESPN for Legette. Wide receiver 46 in PPR last week in Germany versus the New York Football Giants. 3 receptions on 4 targets for 40 yards. Prior to last week, we saw Legette have back-to-back games with 6 or more targets. And if he can steadily maintain the 6 or more targets with the Panthers offense on the rise under Bryce Young, then we will be talking about Legette as a wide receiver 3/flex option. Legette played 98% of the snaps. Jalen Coker played 88%. David Moore played 83%. So again, I can't give the full Gawk 9,000 special to Legette just yet. But again, with Bryce Young looking better, with the offense percolating a lot more, Legette is definitely a guy you want on your roster through the bye week. Next up, we got Bo Nix, quarterback of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week at home in Denver. Shockingly, he is still only rostered in 50.5% of leagues on ESPN. Quarterback 12 last week at the Kansas City Chiefs. 22 completions on 30 attempts for 215 yards and not 1 but 2 touchdowns. Bo Nix to me feels like a nice condom wrap, a nice safe bet to be a top 16-ish quarterback on a per game basis, with the upside of having that big game, of popping off and finishing inside of the top 5 against the Atlanta Falcons defense in a game that could become high scoring if Kirk Cousins and Bo Nix both lock in. I think a top 5 finish is in the cards in this game. Now, am I going to go out and blatantly rank him as a top 5 quarterback? Fuck no, baby. But it is definitely possible. And after this game, he goes up against the Raiders. He goes up against Vegas and then Cleveland prior to the bye, and those are both really solid matchups for Bo Nix. So again, while I don't think anyone is going to talk about how elite the weapons are for the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix, but with rushing upside and with him seemingly found love with Courtland Sutton, I think Bo Nix does have that big upside. At number 6, we got our other quarterback, and that is Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Steelers, going up against the Baltimore Ravens. These are the only 2 quarterbacks we're going to be talking about today's video. So if you are in need of a quarterback and Bo Nix and Mr. Unlimited aren't available in your league, then make sure you ask down below in the comment section so I can help you out. So 40.2% rostered on ESPN for Russ. Quarterback 10 last week up against the Commanders in Washington. 14 of 28 for 195 yards and 3 touchdowns with a pick. 2 of 3 starts in Pittsburgh. He has scored 18 or more fantasy points. After this week, he goes on a trip around the AFC North. He faces the Browns, then the Bengals, then Cleveland again over the next 3 games, all division games that could entice you to play Mr. Unlimited. This matchup also in the AFC North up against the Ravens could be a real tit-for-tat, high-scoring back-and-forth affair. So I definitely think Russell Wilson is a guy that is under consideration for you to start, especially when there are multiple teams on bye. Now, I know no one's really starting fucking Daniel Jones for the Giants. No one's playing Bryce Young, but if you have Kyler, if you have Baker Mayfield, and these are guys you would want to be playing this week. Next up, we move to Mike Licky on my Gesicki tight end of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the LA Chargers in LA on Cause You Waited All Day for Sunday Night. 44.6% rostered on ESPN. Now, when it came to Mike Gesicki, last week, I really gave him the Sukalamink special. I gave him the Gawk 9,000. I was talking him up so heavily. I was talking about how Mike Gesicki was going to smash like his name was Hulk. I was talking about how Mike Gesicki was going going to take over up against the Ravens like King Kong on top of the Empire State Building, banging his chest. This was going to be a huge showing from Gesicki, and ultimately he fell flat on his face. Now, he was the tight end 20, so it wasn't a complete disaster, right? He didn't score 2 fucking fantasy points, but he had 4 receptions on 9 targets for 30 yards. But again, it's important to understand that he had 9 targets, that without Eric All, the targets are going to come in abundance for Gesicki. Now, I understand Tanner Hudson was the one who scored last week for the Bengals, but ultimately, Gesicki is a very talented tight end. We were kind of just waiting for the actual usage to be consistent, and that just was never going to be the case with Eric All, because the team loved the rookie tight end. Joe Shiesty loved throwing the ball to him. But without him, we are going to see Gesicki succeed. Last week was his worst game by far over the last 3 weeks, and I believe a big bounce back is coming for Mr. Mikey G. Next up, we got Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, going up against the Seahawks at home in Santa Clara. 25% rostered on ESPN. And talking about the G, Mike G, we're be talking about Ricky Pearsall, who hit the G spot last week on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Wide receiver 12 in Tampa, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. Fire the fucking cannon. Jauan Jennings played 91% of snaps. Deebo Samuel played 78%. Ricky played 64%. And Ronnie Bell played 16%. Jennings led the team in targets with 11. Pearsall was in 3rd because Christian McCaffrey was in 2nd. And he was tied with 6 with Deebo Samuel. So Jauan Jennings right now feels like the number 2. Deebo's the number 1, even if Jennings out-targeted Deebo, Nick, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You get what I mean, though. Jennings the number 2, and Pearsall the number 3. In high-scoring potential affairs, Ricky Pearsall is startable. I'm not in love with the idea of starting him every single week, right? Like Quentin Johnston, you could make the argument, like, I like starting this guy. I like starting Xavier Legette. I'm not going to sit here, get down on my hands and knees and, you know, just completely say, oh, Ricky Pearsall is going to be this elite wide receiver every single fucking week. But again, if you're down bad with bye weeks, if your wide receiver core is incredibly banged up, then Ricky Pearsall is a guy that you could slide in a pickle. Next up, we move to player number 9 here, which is Tyjae Spears, running back of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings in Tennessee. 45.2% rostered on ESPN for Tyjae. But before we break down Tyjae Spears some more and the rest of the players in the Week 11 waiver wire ads, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel, that you do end up hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure to leave a like on today's video. Make sure you guys check out our sponsor and our friends over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious, you'll get your free pick, which tonight, Monday Night Football, Matthew Stafford higher than half a total passing yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So you take Stafford, you place him in your pick'em with another player on the Dolphins, and in both your picks hit, you'll get 3 times what you put into your pick'em. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will obviously be higher, but they all have to hit. If you're watching this on Tuesday, right? Waivers in your league run on Tuesday, maybe they run on Wednesday, and you're like, oh, Matthew Stafford already played up against the Dolphins. What happens now? Now, if you use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, your free pick will either be an NBA player higher than half a total point or an NFL player higher than half of a total yard. So make sure you check that out. Again, promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So back on in to Mr. Tyjae Spears. Now, Tony Pollard did end up getting hurt in that game last week for the Titans up against the Chargers. He got banged up with his knee, but he did come back into the game relatively fast. So to me, now I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but it doesn't seem serious to me. Again, take my medical advice with a grain of fucking salt, but the fact that he came back and looked fine tells me he's going to be okay, but it is something to monitor. Now, Tyjae Spears in that game up against the Chargers, he was the running back 29. He had 7 carries for 47 yards, and he went 3 of 3, like a free throw in the receiving games for 4 yards. Pollard played 54% of the snaps, and Spears played 46% of the snaps. We heard that when Spears returned, this was just made blatantly clear by the head coach of the team, that they were going to use Spears more because they don't want to have Pollard carry the brunt of the load. And what I mean by that, I guess technically isn't the brunt of the load, pause. because he's going to get that. But what I mean is they don't want Pollard to be this workhorse running back, right? Because when it was Pollard and Joey Chestnut's brother, Julius Chestnut, it was really just the Pollard show. Julius would sit on the bench, fucking shining his, or holding his Gatorade. I was going to say shining his shoes, but that would be impossible because he'd be on the field, right? Shining his cleats, giving a nice spit shine, right? He was holding the jock strap of Tony Pollard, right? And then now with Spears, he's going to get 40% of the snaps or more. Again, just like Warren, no one's going to sit here and be like, oh my God, you got to start fucking Tyjae Spears. No one's going to say that. But if you're down bad, and this is an important topic that we're going to talk about at the end of today's video, or we can just talk about it right now, adding your handcuff in fantasy football right now is vital. Early on in the season, I don't really give a rat's ass about my handcuff. I just don't. If the guy goes down, obviously it sucks, but it is what it is. But now that you're knocking on the door of the playoffs are going to start very, 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 very soon for fantasy. You want to have your handcuff because if you're Breece Hall, knock on wood, you're Bijan, knock on wood, if those guys get hurt, you want their handcuff because while those guys can't fully replace the value you get of your starter, they do give you at least a chance of making up a lot of those points. So make sure that you guys have your handcuffs. If you have Pollard and Tyjae is available, make sure you scoop them up off the waiver wire. At number 10, we got MVS. Now, MVS is going to be a guy that in a lot of people's waiver wire rankings, he's going to be ranked really high because, Nick, didn't you see that last week he was the wide receiver 2 against the Falcons? Oh, man, 3 of 3 for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. Why don't you like him more? He's going up against the Browns this week, which isn't like some rock-solid, rock-hard Viagra matchup here. He's owned in 0.6% of leagues, so you can pick him up. But what I'm here to tell you is, this feels like the guy you pick up, he goes crazy. Again, he went bananas. He was the wide receiver 2 last week. And this week, he scores 2 fantasy points, right? You buy in, you're like, oh my God, MVS is back. I know he couldn't do anything with Rodgers or Mahomes, but Derek Carr's gonna fully unlock him, right? And then you fucking pay the pretty penny, you blow your fab wad, and you pick him up, and he sucks donkey cock, right? Again, am I saying that's a guarantee? Of course not. He did play the most amount of snaps. Him and London Tipton's brother, Mason Tipton, played 55%. Kelvin Austin Jr., 49%. And former fantasy football bust, Dante Pettis of the 49ers, 13%. So if MVS is going to play 55% of the snaps, there's a chance he catches a deep ball any given game, right? But there's a lot of risk in that. There's a whole lot of risk. So while I'm fine picking him up, pretending like he's like this must pick up a waiver wire option is just straight up fucking foolish. Next up, we got Elijah Moore going up against the Saints in New Orleans of the Cleveland Browns, 4.9% rostered on ESPN. Now the team was on bye last week, so we have to hop into the time machine back to week number 9, like one of those old school Doritos Super Bowl commercial ads that I loved. The time machine ones, I don't know why they don't do those anymore. Week 9, more stats. Week 9 goes up against the Chargers. He's the wide receiver 60. Not good, but he had 9 targets. That's important. When you can get 9 fucking targets, something's going to happen. 3 receptions, 28 yards. And it's not just, oh, it's an epiphany. It's one game. It's a woozy. It's a wazzy, right? 9 targets. Oh, it only happened once. No, it happened twice. In back-to-back games with 9 or more targets. Moore to me feels like the wide receiver 3 on this team, right? No one's going to sit there and pretend like, oh my God, Elijah Moore is so much better than Cedric Tillman or so much better than Judge Judy. But if Jameis continues to keep this offense in high gear, I do think in deeper leagues, Moore is startable. Next up, we got Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, wide receiver of the This is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. Going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in MetLife, 8.2% rostered on ESPN. Wide receiver 20 last week in PPR versus the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, 6 of 6 for 71 yards. Now, assuming that Michael Pittman Jr. misses some time based on what I have read is a week-to-week injury, and he's been dealing with this back injury for majority of the season. So that's going to mean that the second round pick out of Texas, AD Mitchell, is going to slot in as the numero dos receiver on this team, wide receiver 2, behind Josh Downs until further notice. I will note, though, that it is incredibly fucking frustrating that even with Flacco under center, Alec Pierce gets a decent amount of shots thrown deep to him, but I just think Adonai Mitchell is so much of a better player than Alec Pierce. I think he's so much of a safer bet, so that's why I'm talking about him, not Alec Pierce. Next up, we got Jonnu Smith, tight end of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in the 305, 26.1% rostered on ESPN. Based on what I heard out of Drew Rosenhaus, I believe his name is, Tyreek's agent, if the Dolphins lose tonight, and if they lose tonight, you guys might never see me. I'll be hanging from the fucking ceiling like that guy from that Morgan Freeman movie where they break out of jail. You know what I'm talking about. The name of the movie is failing to escape me. Andy Dufresne crawled through 8 football fields of shit, or whatever the fuck the saying is, right? That guy, the old dude. If you've seen the movie, you know. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry, but that's a great movie. Make sure you watch it. The name's escaping me, and I'm not going to sit here and look up the name, and there's going to be people in the comment section. Nick, how do you not know the name of this movie? It's an amazing movie. I love that movie. It's actually one of my favorite movies, so the fact that I can't name it off the top of my head is kind of sad. What's your guys' favorite movie? Mine, I'm a 25-year-old guy. It's still Wolf of Wall Street for me, but I like a lot of different movies, so let me know down below in the comment section what your guys' favorite movie is, unless you have questions about fantasy, because, you know, who gives a shit about a movie? Nick, we're 20 minutes in the video, hurry up. I know. Jonnu, so what I heard out of Drew Rosenhaus is that if the Dolphins lose tonight, Tyreek might get shut down. Tyreek might go get surgery on his wrist. If that happens, then Jonnu Smith's going to get an even further bump, because for some reason, while Mike McDaniel's this boy genius fucking guru, oh my God, he's so great, fucking slurp the guy up, we're getting like Jonnu Smith screens all the time. Now the Dolphins play the Rams in LA, so we got to go back to last week. He was the tight end 14 in Buffalo, 5 of 6 for 46 yards. Back-to-back games with 6 targets, having Tua under center. Not going to pretend that Jonnu is like a must-start tight end, but if you have players on bye up against the Raiders, it's a good matchup for him. At number 14, this is more of like a waiver wire stash, and that is Mike Williams, Mike Dub, wide receiver, Magic Mike of the Pittsburgh Steelers, going up against the Baltimore Ravens, 25.4% rostered on ESPN. Why is he like a deep league upside cut that you want to hold on your bench? Because let's call a spade a spade. He got the touchdown last week up against the Commanders to make him the wide receiver 26, 1 of 1, like Jameis Winston, for 32 yards and a touchdown. He played 12% of the snaps. He was outsnapped by George Pickens, obviously 81%. Calvin Austin, 45%. Van Jefferson, 71%. It's going to take him a while before he gets truly integrated enough to where you're like, oh my God, I got to start Mike Williams. But I do think he could end up being a league winner, meaning like the last 2 weeks of the season, last 3 weeks of the season in the playoffs. He's a guy that could end up putting up big points with how Russ has been playing. Final guy to talk about before we just talk about the handcuff philosophy here. We got Gus Edwards, running back of the Los Angeles Chargers, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. 20.6% rostered on ESPN, running back 37 last week versus Tennessee. 10 rushes for 55 yards. Now, the only 10 I saw in that game was Monsieur J.K. Dobbins, 66% snaps, Edwards 25%, and that bastard Hassan Haskins scored the touchdown, 8%. Gus Edwards is going to get work, whether you like it or not. Whether he is as inefficient as it gets, whether he looks like he is running in the quicksand from that Mario Kart map, where there's like the big Sarlacc pit and it sucks you in Mario Kart Double Dash, and then there's like the big desert, like fucking, I don't even know what you would call it. Like, it's like a desert snowman go woo, like a fucking wacky inflatable arm tube man, if you ever played that game. But Gus Edwards, he's not very good. But we know that he has a relationship with the offensive coordinator, and he's going to score touchdowns. And if something happens to Dobbins, who again is like one of the most injury-prone running backs in the NFL, knock on wood, knock on wood, knock on wood. I told you guys all to draft J.K. Dobbins. I'm not rooting for him to get hurt. But Edwards is a nice insurance package. The Geico, the State Farm discount double check. So make sure you guys pick up Gus Bus. Again, this is going to be the part where we talk about handcuffing your running backs. Early on in the season, I'm not a handcuff guy, right? The only handcuffs I use are the purple fuzzy ones I have that are attached to my bed that I use on my wife. So, you know, very nice. But what I was going to actually say is that Gus Edwards, these kind of guys that are handcuffs, Algier, you want them on your team because if something was to happen, if things go tits up, you have a insurance plan. Now, is Algier as good as Bijan? No. Is Braylon Allen as good as Breece Hall? No. Is Gus Edwards as good as J.K. Dobbins? No. You can say it for every running back in the NFL. Is Tyjae Spears as good as Tony Pollard? No. But you want to have the insurance plan in case things go wrong early on in the season. I'm not about holding your handcuff because like burning a hole in your pocket, but at this point in the season, it's worth having that hole in your pocket because if something does go wrong, you then have a person to pivot to. So thank you guys all so much for watching. watching today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Whether you are new to the channel or not, leave a like on today's video. Help me out a ton. Make sure you guys check out Underdog. Promo code Notorious to get your free pick. Matthew Stafford higher than half a total yard tonight, plus a first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. I love you guys more than you will ever know. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen it already. Have a great one. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the running back start sit video. Love you guys more than you will ever know. Have a great one as always. Good boy.